Hello everyone, how you doing? How you doing? Come on in, sit on down, take a seat, take your load off. Today we are going to be discussing more Space Marines. In my last video, I covered the overarching topic of the Space Marines and what they were, but today I'm going to be covering specifically the First Legion. I'm going to make dedicated videos to all of the legions, but for today we're going to start with the first one, chronological order, gotta love it. We're going to be covering the Primarch, we're going to be covering their home world, we're going to be covering a little bit of the lore behind them to get you acquainted with the chapter as a whole. So, with that being said, go ahead and leave a like if you're liking the video, subscribe, maybe hit the notification bell. I can't force you to do anything. But, besides that, sit on down and let's begin. During the Age of Strife, when the warp storm was ravaging the galaxy, Caliban was cut off from the rest of mankind, devolving them back into a feudal state, ruled by a small warrior elite group who were basically knights. They had a strong culture of warfare and nobility. They were constantly in a struggle against beasts that threatened to utterly destroy their civilization. These knights had a code of ethics. They lived by the sword and they died by the sword. And they were struggling against these beasts, albeit because these things were huge, they were massive, raging Hulk monsters that just came over and ruined small settlements all throughout the world. Lionel Johnson was discovered by a knightly group known as the Order, led by a man named Luther. They almost were going to kill him due to thinking he was a monster himself because, you see a big beastly man walking through the woods by himself, probably naked, you're going to think he is too. But the young warrior Luther saw something in him, and instead decided to stop his knights from killing him, and instead they took him back to their fortress monastery, where he was taught human language and culture under the mentorship of said knight named Luther. Him and Luther were best buds, they complemented each other perfectly, and under Luther's tutelage, Lion quickly rose up the ranks in the order, and him and Luther were so unstoppable, tales were being told across Caliban, causing the order to grow immensely in number over the years. They even had to build more fortress monasteries in order to house all of the people that were coming in to be initiated into their order. Eventually, Luther and the Lion got the other knightly orders across the world to wage war across the planet against the great beast of Caliban, to once and for all give humanity a chance to thrive on the planet without being scared of getting their assholes ripped out. They were able to clear the entire planet of the great beasts in a mere decade, so that when the war was over, the Lion was made Supreme Grandmaster of the Order, and although he never outright said it, Luther was envious of the Lion's praise. My man was jealous. Meanwhile, while this is all happening on the Lion's homeworld, the God Emperor of mankind was in the middle of his great crusade to unite humanity. Meanwhile, the Emperor was in the middle of his great crusade doing some asshole tearing for himself. He was in the middle of uniting humanity and purging the planetary system of the Xenos races. The First Legion landed on Caliban and identified him as one of the lost, genetically engineered Primarchs, sons of the Emperor, in the flesh. Probably very easy to tell. Dude was like 10 feet tall. After the Emperor realizing that the same legion that landed on this planet also happened to be the gene sons of the Lion, he was immediately given command of the First Legion. Now Luther and the other members of the Order were obviously put through the trials of the Astartes, and ones that were young enough to become Space Marines were given the organ implants, and the ones that were too old were to undergo genetic manipulation to make them bigger and stronger, more physically capable. Luther being the first of them, and became second in command of the First Legion just like he was of the Order. After his new group of Astartes from the Order were ready, he called his First Legion the Dark Angels, after an old Calibanite myth of shadow-clad angels who came from the sky to aid the people of Caliban in their time of need. Johnson was then left to take command of his portion of the Great Crusade, while meanwhile the Imperium began to turn Caliban into a useful planet for the Imperium instead of some backwater of the solar system. Tons of Calibanites from the planet were inducted into the Imperial Guard, while the rest of the world was pretty much just clearing the forests to create cities and turn Caliban into an asset to the Imperium as a whole. The nobility of the planet was obviously mad at him, as rich people are, so they were mostly dealt with by killing them by the Imperial forces that were now on the Death World. That'll lead us into the next big event in the Dark Angel's early history, which is the shitstorm known as the Great Schism. The Lion was given command of the 4th Fleet in orbit of the planet of Sarash. The Sarash at first seemed to be pretty cool guys ready to be inducted into the Imperium. That turned out to be a lie, as they were secretly worshipping the ruinous powers of chaos. And due to this warp fuckery, the Lord High Exeter of the leader of the Sarashi bureaucracy told Johnson he can piss off. So the Lion personally went down there and took his power sword and skewered him with it. Now unknown to Lionel Johnson, while he was handing out cans of whoop-ass left and right, the Sarashi had secretly put a nuclear device aboard their shuttle, trying to assassinate the fleet's entire command structure, trying to kill Johnson in the process. This is where we diverge into the dark side of the Dark Angels. See Luther still holding grudges against Lionel Johnson for the stolen glory that he could have received had he never found Johnson in those woods on that fateful day. He and a junior librarian named Zahariel managed to eject the shuttle into space, causing only minor damage to the flagship. But the Big Lion himself wasn't having it. He sent Luther, Zahariel, and 500 other Dark Angels back to their home world in disgrace for just allowing the nuclear device aboard in the first place. They were now given the task of overseeing the recruitment of new Space Marines for the 1st Legion from the Calibanite population. You see, secretly, Luther had considered letting the nuclear explosion go off in order to kill Lion and take his place as the rightful leader of the 1st Legion, which is what he thought was taken from him by the Lion. And the Lion wasn't stupid, so he had suspicions about Luther. Even though he didn't allow it to go off, you see, he already had doubts about Luther's loyalty because he thought that Luther was still holding a grudge against him for taking all of his glory that he thought he deserved ever since he was discovered in the forest of Caliban all that time ago. So he sent Luther, Zahariel, and 500 other Dark Angels back to Caliban to take control of the recruitment of the new Space Marines into the 1st Legion from the Calibanite population in order to punish them, which they had no idea that's what it was about, but basically put the motherfucker in timeout. A long time went by and Luther was still on Caliban taking care of the Dark Angels garrison. He and the Astartes under his command were never recalled by his Primarch. While Johnson was out there kicking ass, taking names, and doing his work under the Emperor and making a great name for himself, Luther was just chilling on Caliban, feeling robbed, and wanting to get in on the action. He wanted the fame and recognition that he thought he deserved. See, he was a leader of Caliban, and now that Caliban had become all but this backwater world again, it seemed like he was being insulted by his once best friend. This jealousy and hatred came to an absolute peak whenever the Lion returned back to his homeworld. See, after the Horus Heresy, Lionel Johnson and the Dark Angels returned to Caliban, but once the Legion's vessels made orbit, they were immediately fired upon by Caliban's orbital defense system. Lion, thinking what the fuck's going on, took his vessels back out of the Caliban system, and then he found out that his old buddy Luther was not messing around with him anymore, and that caused the Lion to get so mad that he ordered his fleet to launch an orbital bombardment from the planet, so furious and so righteous that it caused the tectonic plates in the planet to shift. Little did he know, Luther had fallen to the temptations of chaos and the warp. So when the Lion personally led an Astartes strike force into the Tower of Angels, he then had to duel his friend to the death, not knowing that his best friend's mind was clouded by the ruinous powers. Although equally matched, Luther couldn't keep up with Johnson's crazy cardio, leaving him open for a kill. And no matter how mad Lionel Johnson was, he couldn't bring himself to kill his old friend, so Luther took that moment to take a psychic strike at him with some psychic warp powers, nearly fatally wounding the lion. But in one moment, seeing his friend, who he'd known for so many years, laying there, nearly lifeless, his mind cleared, the ruinous powers left his mind for just a second, sending out a cry into the warp, asking anything that could to save his friend. The ruinous powers being so mad that they just lost such a cool dude that would have been great against their fight with the Imperium, lashed out with a warp storm that wrecked the surface of the planet. The world of Caliban broke apart and imploded into a field of orbital debris, with the exception of the oldest and mightiest fortress, monastery of the Order, which was protected under some crazy warp shields. Another part, called the Tower of Angels, but better known as the Rock, was hollowed out by the Dark Angels, fortified, and given a warp drive to transform into a mobile fortress for the Dark Angels' primary monastery. After the destruction of Caliban, the Dark Angels searched the ruins of the Tower of Angels, and they found the lion had been taken by what Luther called the Watchers in the Dark. The Watchers in the Dark had taken him to heal him, but they didn't know that. With that, the First Legion's Primarch was nowhere to be found, nor could no traces of his body be found. All the Astartes who had been converted by Luther to worship Chaos were sucked into the Immaterium and were scattered across time and space. They were to be known as the Fallen Angels, or the Fallen. Now the Dark Angels ruthlessly hunt them, leaving pivotal battles in any situation when given wind that the Fallen are anywhere nearby. They will stop at nothing to eliminate the Fallen, seeing them as the ultimate disgrace to their chapter. Now, if you're watching this in 2023, March 2023 to be exact, then you know Lion has actually returned in the current setting. What is he going to do whenever he gets out? What's he going to do about the Fallen? Because I doubt he knows about that. That is all to be seen. I'm pretty hyped about all this. The Dark Angels are an amazing legion, definitely one of the most popular. I personally love them. I think their backstory is amazing. They have a lot of very interesting standalone characters, and their back and forth with the Fallen is a really cool concept that no other chapter really has. But with that being said, we're going to go ahead and end this video. Thank you all for coming, and I'll catch you later. Also, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. I know that I'm new to this, but I'm getting better. I'm working with it. Over time, hopefully, my skills will improve. But besides that, I'll catch you later.